Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joined us in Ukraine Media Center Ukraine Forum. I want to thank everybody who joined us in this hall and virtually. It's day 267 of the full-scale aggressor in our land, and I want to thank the representatives of all the mass media who tell the world the truth about this war. Right now, joining us live is Iryna Vereshchuk, Vice Prime Minister, Minister for the Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories of Ukraine, and we will talk about the preliminary results of the work of the Coordination Headquarters for the Occupied Territories. Thank you, dear colleagues. Good afternoon. You just mentioned my office, that I'm the Minister for Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories. So me and my colleagues, my deputies are here. We're thinking for a long time about the reintegration of the temporarily occupied territories. Is not something discussed now because our armed forces do everything they can, and we want to thank them for that, that we have more such territories, deoccupied territories. The temporarily occupied territories are less, and those liberated from the enemy become more. And we joke about renaming our ministry for including the deoccupied territories, because our focus, the focus of Coordination Headquarters, which is my honor to head, is currently shifted to the deoccupied territories, to liberated people, to liberated lands. When we're talking about the total of the deoccupied towns and villages, it's 943, and the number is increasingly growing. And we thank our guys, our armed forces who give everything to liberate our people and our land. As of today, we have the occupied territories in 5 regions, specifically Kherson, Kharkiv, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Mykolaiv region. You see in this presentation, on this slide, in Kharkiv region, 568 towns and villages, and about 179,000 people who are liberated currently and with whom we work now. In Kherson region, this number is 226 towns and villages. I've seen this number increase today. It's 243, and around 133,000 people, out of which is the city of Kherson itself. In Mykolaiv region, it's 99 towns and villages and more than 35,000 people. Donetsk region accounts for 43 towns and villages. We count big and small ones, and more than 14,500 persons. Luhansk region only has 7 liberated towns and villages. We don't have access to all of them, and it's about 100 people inhabiting that area. I'm talking about the people who did not evacuate it yet. They are those who live in those territories, whom we come to and whom we try to help there on site. So in brief about the legislative background, because it's very important. We have a very significant layer of our work, and like Cabinet of Ministers and the Ministry, we were responsible for development of the plan of actions for the executive bodies and for local authorities during the armed aggression of Russian Federation. So the first plan of actions was approved by the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers back on the 1st of April 2022, but it was not widely promulgated because it was sick documents for service utilization. We were sending them with field posts. So let's remember the situation back then. So we were telling about the objective steps which could be taken back then, and we transferred the information in that way. But we had that plan in place and people were using it. However, the society was not aware of it, and society had objective questions if we had this plan. So now, yes, I can say that we had this plan and it is in place. And now, having this experience, we understand that we have to update the part which refers to deoccupation, because there is a part of the country under occupation. In some part, there is active warfare going on, and the significant part is the occupied territories. Those are different statuses and different legal forms and different legislation to be implemented in these or those territories. So we decided to separate them, and by order of Prime Minister, we adopted a separate resolution related to the plan of actions in the deoccupied territories. It's important because even there is a lot of work to be done. For example, stabilization actions, the reestablishment of local authorities, the medical and social aid. First of all, for the people, what status will people have? Are they going to be recognized as those afflicted by occupation? So the people were under occupation for a long time, many days and nights in different arms. In Kharkiv region, it's one number, and in Kherson region, it's a different figure, and there is no understanding of the social guarantees to be provided to those people. For example, people in Kyiv region, they ask me, we were under occupation too, and we were suffering, and they're objectively asking, will we have the status of those afflicted by occupation? We have signed order number 75. I understand that it's a lot of resolutions and orders, but I want the people to understand the logic of the government, why the government does it. Order 75 defines the territories where active warfare is going on, and it's being updated on a daily, twice a month. The military administrations submit their details to us, and we update the information, and it's being documented on a regular basis. It's adopted for payment of financial aid. 45 billion hryvnias was already paid to the people afflicted by Russian aggression who were forced to leave their homes. Internal refugees, we know who they are, and a lot of people received that financial aid. And resolution 265, I'm talking about now, is 168 steps, which will define the status and define the algorithm for rebuilding of infrastructure, electric, water, and gas supply. In one word, all the measures to mitigate the consequences of temporary occupation. And I frankly hope that we are close to the finish. If everything is going to be all right, we'll adopt this resolution next week during the Cabinet of Ministers meeting, and we will publish it. We will promulgate it so everybody understands what are the steps the government takes. It's also related to the finance, because we understand that the reserve fund is good, but we have to look for the sources for reestablishment of the rebuilding of water and energy objects, to reestablish water and gas and electricity supply to liberated territories. We understand that we have to have policy in place, and those are the billions of hryvnias, and this order 265 will regulate our policy in this field. I hope that it will be more and more structured, more constructive, and in the center of this policy will be a human, a citizen who is in the deoccupied territory, who suffers a lot. I visit almost on a weekly basis. I try to go there. I try to meet people, to communicate with them directly. I know how difficult it is for them. I understand how complicated it is to renew the documents, to return the lost property, to receive indemnification, and even the request for fairness, the request for justice. When they ask me if the collaborationists are going to be punished, we have to take that into account in our policy, which is being built from the scratch. And we have to recognize that in April we had one experience, and in November our experience is completely different, and the regulations are different, and our steps are different. So going a little bit ahead, I will tell you, when we were entering Kharkiv region in September, when our armed forces in a steady manner deoccupied a large part of Kharkiv region, and what happens now in Kherson region, the reintegration of the liberated territory. So those are two very different approaches, so to say, and I want to thank everybody, first of all, to the president, who as a leader provides impulse. I want to thank Volodymyr Zelensky, so that everybody gets involved in the process of reintegration. I want to thank the government, I want to thank the parliament, which, for example, adopted yesterday a necessary resolution to establish the authorities of the military administrations in the liberated areas, to delegate the authorities to them where there are no local authorities reestablished, to be able to solve the issues in a steady and quick manner, because it's reestablishment of the connection with the government registers, because there should be somebody with a stamp and seal who can allocate funds, who can solve all those issues, dotations and subventions. So we understand that there is a plan, the implementation is going on, but let's proceed to the real steps which are already in compliance with our plan being taken in the deoccupied territories. We're talking here about, I want to proceed to the next slide, that as of 15th of November 2022, the humanitarian help, humanitarian aid provided as hygiene and food ratios is provided to almost 230,000 citizens. If we had 500,000 people living in the deoccupied territories, almost 230,000 are covered by this humanitarian aid. It's not everything that we've done as of now, because the process is still in place. We provided food ratio, but the manufacturing facility was not restarted in a month, so people did not receive the opportunity to provide themselves with the food and financing, because it's not a volunteer approach. When we came and provided steady help, we have to keep growing the potential and dynamics of the renewal of the territories, and we're talking about the fact that the people have to decide it for themselves. You see, it's winter coming, it's snow, and the temperature is falling down. There are towns and villages where the gas supply will not be reestablished, and in some it is reestablished already, and people can count on having heat supply at least. We're talking about the facilities which provide heat and supply. You see what enemy does in a vile and cowardly manner, hitting the civil infrastructure, which makes it impossible the operation of, say, pump station or the facilities which provide heat supply. And obviously their tactics and strategy is systematic terrorism. We understand it. We call it crime. We constantly call it crime against humanity, the crime of genocide, but it even comes across those limits defined by the international humanitarian law and international judicial and legal practice has, because this number and large scale of the crimes committed by the enemy in relation to the civil population of our country, it's horribly impressive. And sometimes we want to sharply ask our partners and those who are the countries of the civilized world, how long will it take? How long is it going to go on? How long we will look for the answer to the crimes committed by Russia in relation to civil population? Because civil population suffers most now. When the armed aggression is going on in the territories where the armed forces are present, who act in a resistive manner, so they're in the battlefield, they see whose motivation is better, and we have advantage there. When people with the arms are motivated, when they force out, when they oust the enemy from our land, and without winning us there, they resort to the cynical attacks of destruction, of eliminating our civil population. So I call the international community to look at the mirror and give the answer. If they can't tolerate it further on, or they will listen to what the president says and what Ukrainian people demand, just have them liable, to have the aggressor liable, to stop the genocide, and have Russia liable for its crimes. So let's get back to our presentation. So as to the humanitarian help, in Kharkiv region, these figures, they are dynamic. So as of today, tomorrow it will be a bigger number, but today, 7,500 tons. Those are food products, hygienic means, water, everything what's necessary for the primarily provision of the people with the most necessary things. For Kherson and Kherson region, it's 1,000 tons. In a few days, me and my colleagues, we will visit Kherson and Mykolaiv regions. We will accompany another humanitarian convoy with our Western partners. We thank them for their partner organizations from United Nations, International Organization for Food, UNICEF, who help our kids. We go to Kherson with a ready winter clothing, Ukrainian Red Cross, Caritas, please. I don't want to offend or forget anybody. We really appreciate it. That's what we need. Quick, prompt, and adequate reaction. And thanks God, we do it together now. We coordinate clearly our efforts. We understand who does what and how promptly we can do it. So in Mykolaiv region, it's 460 tons, but we understand, so there is the smaller number of the occupied territories. Thanks God, Mykolaiv region was not occupied totally, and we have opportunity to help Mykolaiv. In Donetsk region, it's 124 tons, and in Luhansk region, for the time being, it's a small number of the occupied territories, but we root for them to increase. As to the slide number 3, as of 15th November 2022, the international donors provided financial help to more than 48,000 people in the amount of more than 65 million hryvnias. I'll understand my logic and my personal engagement in this process. We understand that for our people, for those who suffered the occupation, and for the others as well, but currently we're talking about them. We need to help them with the cash. People have to receive cash to make their personal choice what they need more, because if we systematically bring, for example, only humanitarian sets like food ratios, so that the people will have more just food products, and they will have less, for example, medicines or less clothing, or they will still lack something that they would want and would be able to do in case they had money. So we appeal to our international donors, and we thank them for that. Our Ukrainian Committee of Red Cross helps our people in the occupied territories to receive cash. 1,200 hryvnias was the first program to be implemented in Kharkiv, Donetsk, and now in Kherson regions. Thank you. Mykolaiv region is preparing. They're preparing the lists, and we will start next week there. The next program we coordinated with International Organization for Migration. They heard us. 2,200 hryvnias. This is something people receive in Kharkiv. So they received 1,200, and then because we understand that 1,200 hryvnias is not the amount of money which can satisfy the basic needs of anybody. So 2,200 hryvnias is something people receive in Kharkiv region, Donetsk region. In Kherson, did they receive it? Yes, in Kherson region, not in the city of Kherson, first in Kherson region, and then we will add Kherson. And the third organization which agreed to pay money is the United Nations. Let's start with Kherson. We told them that this is the place where help is needed. They agreed to pay 2,200, but they say they are ready to pay within 3 months. And this is something that I consider a good result, because if people know that apart from other payments, apart from social payments and pensions, people will receive some additional aid, as those who suffered some terrible nights and days under occupation, some additional funds. I think that this will be right, and it will help them to go through the winter. Let's move on. As to the next slide, as of 15th November 2022, the gas, water, and electric supply and mobile connection were established in 943 towns and villages. You see all of them in this slide. I will tell you what's the biggest problem, for example, in Kherson region. It's very difficult to reestablish the electricity supply. And when we don't have electricity, we understand that it's difficult even to check the water supply, because we don't understand if there is any flow if there is any necessity of emergency works. And it all takes time because the state emergency service cannot in a steady manner demine and promptly demine this large scale of mined territories. I said we pray on them because that they do it very promptly. For example, now during the coordination headquarters meeting, the state emergency service had optimized their work in Donetsk and Kharkiv region to help Kherson region. They have this experience from Kyiv region, is the 5th region where they do the demining operations. And obviously now, within a week, they would be able to report about some real demined substations. And we will see the bigger picture of where the repair works has to take place and where we will have to rebuild the facilities because the destruction is quite big, and we will have a clearer picture. And just going a little bit ahead, I will tell you that generators will be saving us this winter, generators and fuel for them. We understand that the more generators we have, it's good that if there will be light and everything will be connected to the power sources. However, our big request and the work done by the Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, he held a number of meetings to have our Western colleagues to join this process in a focused manner, because nobody in the world was preparing to this scale of catastrophe, and generators are physically not enough. And once again, I want to thank Volodymyr Zelensky, who clearly invited from our Western partners the number, who clearly requested the number of generators, because they are different for industry. That's one type of generators, and for people it's other type of generators. We understand for example, the bakery to work, we need one type of generator, and these steps are being coordinated by the Prime Minister, by the Office of the President, and us as the coordination headquarters, as the executive body. We try to promptly reach people in their dwellings and to reestablish heat supply at the level of residential buildings or apartment blocks, or heating stations to be deployed. There will be stationary heating stations and mobile posts. So it's our task on the basic level, and the Office of the President is taking care of provision the country with the powerful generators, and I think it's very right, and it will have proper effect. Let's go further. As to Ukrposhta, the post office, I was coming your way, and we have a chat of the coordination headquarters, and in between our meetings we exchange information in the chat. We get reports from the regions and the bodies who reestablish their authority and their operations. They send us pictures, so we see it in real time. So just 15 minutes ago, Ukrposhta Igor Smilyansky reported, just like we promised, I'm quoting now, 6 post offices reestablished their operation in Kherson. And we took the timeline, so let's say we will have this number of post offices to work in some town or village until Thursday, so to say. So this is the way we reestablish the connections. Ukrzaliznytsia, I want to thank them. We call them the crazy bees. They reestablish the railway connection in a very prompt way. They organized the rail connection with Mykolaiv, and soon it will be done with Kherson. I hope we will reestablish communication, and it will be the renewal of life, rebirth of life. So this is the reintegration we're fighting for now. People have to see that they're not somewhere else isolated on the island, that they can take the decision and they can make a choice, either stay here or go elsewhere. And we continue evacuation. By the way, we'll have another slide in this regard, and we recommend women and persons with limited mobility. We understand that it will be difficult winter without electricity. So the vulnerable categories of population, we advise them to go to the Western Ukraine. We promise that we will help them to get accommodated there, everything that international organizations, volunteers, and local governments can provide, and open the loving hearts of our citizens in Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, and Chernivtsi regions. If you have this opportunity, please consider this option to go through winter. You see, the land is already deoccupied. Give a little time to our electricity technicians, emergency personnel, to renew those territories, rebuild their territories, so you could come back into the better conditions. I would also like to thank the social bodies. For example, the pension fund reestablished their operation in Kharkiv region. And for situation is different. For example, Vovchansk is different from Kupiansk. Somewhere the local authorities were loyal to their allegiance, and unfortunately in some places they are absent now, but it's all legislation, it's all time to be spent to reestablish the authority, to reestablish the governance over their territories. And I want to thank the pension fund, because wherever they can, they resume the operation of their departments, because the pensioners are worried if they receive their pensions, if those pensions were kept. I want to assure you the pensions were accumulated for all the months of temporary occupation, and you can withdraw them in any mode you can, through Privatbank, through Oshad Bank. You will be able to receive them in cash through Ukrposhta. I want to thank the banks too, because they resume operation in the occupied territories too. For example, the Privatbank reported to our coordination headquarters bank that the branches are open. We see the people thank to the local employees, and I joined those thanking words for their motivation. As to the healthcare facilities, for what I understand, about 1,000 patients are currently in the stationary healthcare facilities. We have the mobile brigades of emergency medical help. At least 8 stations with humanitarian medicines are available. We understand that the pharmacies were pillaged. We understand that we have to reestablish access of the people to the medicines which are available and which can be sold without recipes. There are special stations equipped, and we will provide the addresses where those stations are available and people can use them. Now, as to the slide number 6. Okay, let's proceed to evacuation. From the Kharkiv Oblast, we evacuated during the liberation period about 24,000 people. Of them, almost 2,500 are children, and more than 450 are people with limited mobility. We help them move to the Western Ukraine, and we understand that the conditions are better there. We prepare the legislation so that the regions which accept additional load have funds to maintain these people and have legal background that they can accept those people, that it's not on a volunteer basis, but it's a normal policy of the government. We understand that we have to thank the international organizations, but as the government, we have to resume these possibilities, and we have to make people understand that the government provides them with such a choice. So together with the military administrations, we moved 79 children and 74 people with limited mobility, 578 people from Donetsk region, from Kherson region more than 357 people from Lugansk region. So this is the number of evacuated people, and the process is still going on. But again, I want to emphasize that it's a voluntary thing. We don't force anybody. We have to give people options. If they know that they can write to the chatbot to appeal to us or to the military administration in any way that they want to evacuate, they have to know where they go and what awaits for them there and what they can count on there. So this is what we're taking care on. In brief, that's it for me. If you allow, I can answer your questions. Ms. Iryna, you said that during the next week, we will consider the resolution on the mitigation of the consequences of the occupation. Does it envisage any financial aid to the people who were under occupation? We understand that some of them spent 6, 7, 8 months without jobs, and it will be a powerful support to them, as you mentioned. We have a resolution 1195, which helps to financially support people who were under occupation and who want to evacuate. The account is open and there is money in the account, and everybody who takes this resolution, we are ready to pay to everybody who wants from this account. Those who suffered occupation, for example, the Ukrainian Committee of Red Cross, 1,200, 2,200 that we mentioned, these are cooperation with the government, and that's the program of the support in this shape. It's a cash form, and this resolution will not envisage specifically any financial support because it's a framework thing and it sets rules for who does what. In particular, the resolution as to the financial support is 1195. You said you were taking part in development of the legislation for collaborationists and their liability. What's the status of this draft? So that this draft is currently considered by the committees of the parliament. We call everybody to proceed to its consideration because many people look into the future with fear because they don't want, if they fall under those categories, we want it to be legally determined. We want people not to be afraid if they were not going to cooperate. If they did not accept the passports, for example, well, we can look at the circumstances. If they were not going to, did not attend referendum, but due to the circumstances found themselves under temporary occupation, they cannot be called collaborationists. And we want to separate the people who even today, for example, in the territory which is currently occupied or just recently liberated, if these people, by their experience or life experience, they have certain job during the occupation, I want to cautiously ask everybody not to refer to everybody as collaborationists. And I want to ask everybody, I'm talking to people who choose the way to survive now or to continue their life in the temporarily occupied territories. Do not cooperate, do not accept the passports of the Russian Federation, in no way try to communicate and try to evacuate. The situation is deteriorating there. People are being kidnapped. It becomes more and more complicated to live there. Just for the citizens of Ukraine, even pro-Ukrainian or non-pro-Ukrainian, they're citizens of Ukraine. They have right. But you see, the enemy tortures, the enemy punishes for just those who find forced to say a word in Ukrainian language. So my call is still the same. Do not accept passports, do not cooperate, and if you have an opportunity, evacuate. Dear colleagues, your questions. Ukrinform, Iryna Kožuchar. Ms. Iryna, recently you announced the beginning of evacuation from Kherson region. Has this evacuation already started? And if so, can you name any figures? I'm leaving that way shortly to have coordination meetings with everybody, because one thing is to be in Kyiv and staying there is another feeling. That's why I want to go there to see the people, to communicate with them, that we really want to provide people with 2 evacuation trains, evacuation corridors, because it's not necessarily the train, it can be another transport. If it's Kherson, they will be evacuated through Mykolaiv. If it's the right bank closer to the Dnipropetrovsk region, so it's going through Kryvyi Rih. And we will provide cash to everybody who evacuates, free accommodation, food. We will provide full support. It doesn't matter what will be the number of these people, whether it's 100 or 1,000. We are ready to accept them. I went to Zakarpattia region, Khmelnytsk region. Ivano-Frankivsk to check all those available bunks, what expects for the people there. So yes, we are ready for evacuation and we are processing these issues. I will talk to local authorities in Kherson and we will coordinate those corridors. More questions, dear friends?
Russian passportization. Do you have any figures for how many people took Russian passports in the territories which Russia claimed to annex in September? And second question, about people who left Crimea or Ukrainian territory because of mobilization or because of the war, and who maybe only had Russian documents. What kind of problems do these people have, and what's Ukraine doing to help them come back to Ukraine or settle in Europe?
Дякую. У мене немає.
Thank you very much for the question. I don't have the exact number of the people who, after proclamation by Putin of the so-called pseudo-republics, so-called results of the pseudo-referendum, because this number is really not so big. We do not recognize any other citizenship apart from Ukrainian. We don't recognize any Russian passports, any passportization. The only citizenship in Ukraine is Ukrainian, and all those passports in compliance with our citizenship legislation. And answering the another part of your question as to Crimea and those people who really were saving themselves from mobilization, another big war crime committed by Putin and Russia in general. We understand that people, and many of them, only have Russian documents. Unfortunately, temporary occupation of Ukrainian Crimea is going on for a number of years, and unfortunately not many people retained until now the Ukrainian documents. We created at the level of Cabinet of Ministers that I have an honor to head an interbody working group which considers cases like this when people left, for example, to Kazakhstan or Lithuania or Georgia or Turkey. They left there using Russian documents or temporarily certificates. They appealed to the consulate, and we already developed a resolution for the temporary certification for the people, even with the children. People are coming back, and now here, through the migration service, they verify themselves, identify themselves, and they, for example, if they don't have a passport, they have a birth certificate, and Ministry of Justice provides relevant documents. And I do acknowledge that we want to help people. We understand that such people are the hostages. They don't want to go to war. You've heard the president calling that to avoid mobilization by all means. In this case, we don't recognize such people as violators of law. We consider them citizens of Ukraine, and we help them to return. And here the process goes in a legal way. Now, as to the number of those left, as per our estimates, it's at least, when we're talking about the Crimean Peninsula, it's at least 80,000-90,000 people from Crimea, from Crimean Peninsula, those who left due to possible mobilization. We're talking about the key destinations. This Kazakhstan, Georgia, they have their communities already there, and they know how to contact us. Many of them want to go back to Ukraine. Some people want to stay in the countries of European Union, or for example, Turkey. Many people, for the time being, are in Turkey. More questions, dear friends? Ms. Iryna, maybe a complicated question. Lately, within the last month, we're seeing the occupiers almost block the exit for our people from occupied territories. We know that Donetsk, Zaporizhia, they were all living through Vasilivka. If previously it was about 1,000 people per day, now it's maybe up to 100. But we understand that it does not give them the opportunity to leave. I mean, all those who want, what should be our action? Should we appeal to international organizations to give our civilians an option to leave the occupied territories to go through the winter? Yes, we constantly appeal to the international organization with demand to provide the humanitarian corridor for our people from the temporarily occupied territory. I was the participant of a number of meetings in the Office of President where the Andriy Yermak, the head of the presidential office, appealed to ICRC, who has a relevant mandate, and he demanded from them to open the corridors and to provide the option, the opportunity to live, for the people to go to the territories under control of the Ukrainian government. And the response of the ICRC is they're ready, but they are only ready to be a neutral part, so they can only take part after we coordinate it. But we are at war. We are being attacked. We are a victim of aggression of Russian Federation, and international community should either publicly recognize their incapacity, and we should be documented as a legal fact that the humanitarian corridors are not being opened by fault of Russian Federation. And then it will be evaluated by the judicial authorities. The silence of the ICRC in this regard is irresponsibility in my point of view, and I fully support the position of Mr. Yermak and the Office of the President and our government that you cannot keep silent about the facts of the crime, because the Geneva Conventions is what envisages the humanitarian corridors. There is warfare going on, and people should have an opportunity to exit this territory, because we're talking about the civil population. In other case, it's seen as the international war crime. And we go again and again, we go to the organizations with relevant mandate, to ICRC, so that they publicly announce that how many times we had meetings, how many times we explained, how many times we said how many people want to leave, and what they did as international neutral mediators, those authorized by the international community for such negotiations. If we try in this way, like you coordinated, and we will just witness it, that's not the way. It's the road to nowhere. And the last question about the train to Kherson. According to your timeline, can you give some approximate estimate? You will see it shortly. You will see it and you will feel it by yourself. I don't want to, as I say, I don't want to black eye. Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues, for your interest. I will remind you, we had Iryna Vereshchuk visiting us, Vice Prime Minister and Minister for the Reintegration of temporarily occupied territories, and we trust in our armed forces and work together for our victory. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.
Да. Да, давайте.